From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good morning, everyone. We are delighted to see such a large crowd here today. I've been telling some of our colleagues that this is one of the busiest weeks we have here at the Library of Congress. We have visitors from around the world, literally, and we're hosting the Program for Cooperative Cataloging Operations Committee meeting, and actually they generously agreed to give up 90 minutes so that we could have this presentation this morning. And those attendees from the International Preservation Consortium that is also meeting here this week can join us, and we have other visitors from other national libraries. And by the way, I am Beecher Wiggins. I am Director for Acquisitions and Bibliographic Access here at the Library of Congress. I generally just launch in and start talking and assume that everyone knows who I am, and our home folk do. But just to be courteous, let me say who I am. And I have the privilege of introducing the speakers for this morning's session. This is part of the ongoing series that we have established here called the Digital Future and You. And we present this to our staff that we take advantage of either visiting experts or other colleagues that we bring in to talk about cutting edge or what's going on in automation in the web world and semantic web world. And so this is one of those opportunities. We have at least 3 or 4 colleagues from the National Library of Sweden who are here visiting, and we'll be meeting with them. And they graciously agreed to talk to us about the linked data work that they are doing, and they are leaders and initiators in that. So we thought this would be a good opportunity for all of us to learn and hear more. We have 2 of the presenters, and I won't spend a lot of time going over their bios. They are on the handouts that I hope we have somewhere in the back. Is that right? No handouts? Oh, well then maybe I do need to talk a little bit about that. Let me make sure that I have it here with me, so I should come prepared. We have Martin Malmsten and Miriam Safstrom from the National Library of Sweden. And they'll be talking to us, as you can see from the first screen that's shown, on linked data of the National Library of Sweden. Martin is the head of software development at the National Library of Sweden, and in that capacity he works with many aspects of LIBRIS, the Swedish Union catalog. He created the linked data interface for LIBRIS to experiment with RDF, not to be confused with RDA, which stands for Resource Description Framework, and he'll talk a bit about that, I'm sure, as he goes through his talk, that links to other data sets. He's interested in how libraries continually relink to vast data sets. He believes that information available to anyone is what libraries are about, and of course that has been our mantra from day one. And if he made a comment that if he is forced to choose between web and semantic web, he views the web part of semantic web as the more important part, and I imagine he will explain why he has that belief when he talks to us. Miriam Safstrom is the metadata coordinator at the National Library of Sweden, and her responsibility involves metadata created at the National Library, and she deals with coordination of the metadata created and handled by their union catalog, LIBRIS. And she is concerned about the metadata compatibility with international sources. She takes a huge interest in international standardization work, part of her visit with us today and some of the conversations she'll be having following this meeting and this session. She and Martin will be playing off each other, and I will leave it up to them in terms of how they coordinate and present to us. So with that, let us welcome our guests, and we welcome all of you to this session that I think will be an enjoyable one this morning.
Thank you, Beecher. I must start with saying how thrilled we are to be here and to be able to speak to you all about our work at the Swedish National Library. I can't assume that everyone knows who I am, but as Beecher said, I'm Miriam Safstrom, metadata coordinator of the National Library of Sweden, and I will start with a short introduction about Sweden and our National Library. Then Martin will talk more about our linked data work, and then I will finish up with some closing comments. I brought this. This is Sweden, or or actually it's not Sweden, it's a bit bigger than that, but it's you can see the picture here. Sweden is a kind of a small country when it comes to inhabitants. It's about 9.5 million inhabitants, and we have about 40 university and research libraries, approximately as many government and special libraries. The National Library of Sweden has, until recently, until last year, our main responsibility was for research and university libraries, but as of the 1st of January 2011, our responsibility is also the public libraries. So that's a huge and a welcome challenge for us, which we are working with. Also, I must say, this map, it's not, you shouldn't rely on that. We have we have had to adjust it to scale, and then some of the sea monsters up in the left corner, we have got to get rid of those. I will say some short things about our Swedish Union Catalog, which you know is LIBRIS. It's 175 libraries working together, corporate cataloging. It's mostly, as I said, university and research libraries, but we also have 20-something public libraries working in LIBRIS, and we expect that to increase now that our responsibility has been expanded. They work together and they use one integrated library system for cataloging. LIBRIS consists of about 7 million records now and counting. When we have our new catalog, it will be very much more records, if we will still be talking about records then. An important part of LIBRIS is the Swedish National Bibliography. It forms like kind of a core database in LIBRIS. In Sweden, as it is a small country, we adhere to, it's very important for us to adhere to international standards. So we use Mark 21 for cataloging, and it's used for both bibliographic holdings and authority records. As a cataloging code, we use KRS, Katalogiseringsregler för svenska bibliotek, which is a translation adaptation of AACR2. So we're with great interest following work on RDA, which we also must, you know, relate to. We have 2 years ago, I think, we started using Dewey Decimal System for in our catalog, and our subject headings are compatible with the LCSH. So that's an important part of our work, to try to relate to international standards. We also try to cooperate international as much as we can, and take some small part in the development of our libraries, which Martin will now talk more to you about. I give the floor to Martin, my esteemed colleague.
Thank you. Let's see, let's do this. Okay, thank you for having me as well. My name is Martin Malmsten. I'm head of development at the LIBRIS department at the National Library of Sweden. And like Miriam said, LIBRIS is a cooperative environment for cataloging. It's been around since, I think, 72, or I know since 72, because we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. It actually started 71, but it didn't actually work until 72. That's what they tell me. So we're going with 40 years this year. I'm guessing that early 70s in Sweden, basically like late 60s in the United States, so it's very much cooperative, doing things together, peace. And so they decided to build this computer system for libraries, and you should do it cooperatively. So you catalog in a central database, and then everyone benefits. And this picture is meant to symbolize that the more libraries you add, a smaller and smaller part of what you have is unique to you, but you still get the benefit of the whole database. That's sort of the basic idea of LIBRIS when it started, and it's been like that for 40 years. Of course, cataloging goes through changes, and now we're dealing much more with electronic resources than printed books, but the idea is still the same, that it's a cooperative environment. And that has formed the base of our of the services we provide. The catalog is the base for our web services, the cataloging interface, and et cetera, et cetera. It's the heart of our system, basically. However, to actually get it to work, we have started, starting a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, we needed to add layers upon layers of functionality on top of our ILS. So it became sort of this onion-like service where the core is still a traditional commercial ILS, but we've built linked data, we've built, what's that called? Interlibrary loans. We've built a lot of stuff around this database. And in the end, it didn't really hold up to what we wanted to do. So we've decided to build a new cataloging infrastructure in Sweden for our libraries. Excuse me. And there's some challenges with that, of course, when you want to build something new. Because we have all these things that we want to do. For example, RDA, how are we going to cope with RDA? We have Mark 21 now. Perhaps we need to cope with RDA. We need to cope with FRBR. We need to cope with other formats as well. We have data sets within the national libraries in EAD. We have people that would like to catalog in TEI. We have Dublin core records. And that poses an interesting problem if you want to build a system that encompasses all of these formats. How do you authorize a Dublin core record with the Mark 21 authority? That's probably quite easy, but how do you authorize an EAD record with the Mark 21 authority? That's probably harder. And how do you transition to RDA without needing to rebuild the whole system? Those are some of the challenges when we started thinking about building a new system ourselves. There is also the matter of scale, of course. I don't know how many books there are in the world, but Google says something about 130 million. But let's say there's more than that. It's not a huge number, actually. But if you count articles as well, perhaps you come up to perhaps 1 billion, let's say 2 billion records that you need to, or things that you need to count and you need to search. It's not a huge amount of records, really. 10 years ago, millions of records was a big deal. 10 years from now, I don't think 2 billion records will be a big deal. And that's good to keep that in mind. So we set the bar fairly high when building this, or the goal is to be able to handle 1 billion records. That's our billion record challenge, or billion thing challenge. I say record too much. So yeah, so there's scale. We also need to work with massive imports of data for electronic resources, for example. You need to be fast. That's interesting. And there's another thing. LIBRIS is a cooperative catalog, which means that there exists local processes at the libraries. They start doing things by themselves, and then this whole doing it cooperatively doesn't really work, and they want to import stuff, and then we get deduplication, and it gets problematic. So what you want is for people to be able to use this database or this service as an integral part in their local process, which might be digitization or web archiving or whatever. That's a really important goal for this. And you might wonder, what has this anything to do with linked data? But it does, I assure you. And I think I need to explain this, because my daughter said, "Dad, why is the trash can burning?" But it meant to be 4 databases, of which one is not feeling very happy. It's broken. So the thing with this image is meant to show that this infrastructure cannot be dependent on one institution or one server or one whatever. It needs to be distributed in a sense that you can take away parts and it will still work. And now we're sort of moving towards the web part. But that's a really, that's really, really important. Let's see, where am I? So the question became this. We either aggregate all data, because libraries are about information, and hypothetically we could collect all data in one place and have it searchable. I mean, Google, of course, but the question is that really a good idea? Or should we just embrace the fact that data is created, updated, and deleted in a lot of different places, and build systems that can handle that? And of course, now the web part comes in. And we've chosen to, I mean, aggregation is not bad. I've just told you that we're setting the bar for 1 billion records. So aggregation is not bad, but we probably need to just accept the fact that data is created elsewhere as well. And to work with that data and to, well, just deal with it somehow. Both the idea of and technically. And if you look at your basic Mark 21 record, there's a lot of good information here, of course. The name of the author, or the authors, rather, the name of the publisher. We have subject headings and the genre. And these parts are very problematic for a lot of people. The thing with this, though, is that this makes sense within the format. It makes sense within a system. That number to the right of the 0 subfield in the 100 field tells me something about an identifier for an authority record. But there's no information. I need to know that. I need to know where that authority file is. I need to know how to get it. I need to know what it means, etc., etc. There's a lot of information that is not available to a machine, for example, looking at this record. So linked data, or semantic web, replaces this with identifiers instead. So instead of having a string that is meant to be unique or meant to be read by a human or printed on a catalog card, you mint an identifier and say, okay, Strindberg, the identifier is this. And it's a very exact way of pointing to something. Right now we have no idea what we're pointing to, but what we're pointing to is at least it's a very, very precise way of pointing. Whereas the string is fairly blunt, and you may need to add to that string, for example, if the death date is actually wrong. So your heading changes. The identifier is persistent. So you're being very precise if you exchange your strings for identifiers. And then we come to the part where in the library system, at least the ones that I've seen, you have this magic part where you connect authority records to bibliographic records through headings. And the heading probably looks something like that, Strindberg, August, or with an A, because it's in the A, or it should probably be a D somewhere over there. Again, you use a string to connect records, and it's very blunt, because the string changes, it doesn't match anymore. If you have it in the same system, you can do something like global headings change, and change everything that's connected to that heading. But if you have, well, there's a lot of logic in the system that you don't know that much about. So in linked data, what we do instead is we have minted identifiers for the record, we have minted identifier for the authority and the bibliographic records, and we now connect them with a link instead. It's a very precise way of pointing from the authority records. Oh, yeah, the arrow is in the wrong direction. Yeah, so a very precise way of doing it wrong. But on the other hand, so I'm going to try to turn this around. On the other hand, it could be very, very easy to find this error. If you point in the wrong direction and you said this type of relationship can only be between a bibliographic record and an authority record, and you've done the other way around, it's very easy to find. So yeah, that was, yeah, exactly, thank you. And if you do this for a lot of records and authorities and subject headings and persons, etc., you end up with this instead. And the interesting part here is that there's no record. The record doesn't exist in this view. It's become a graph instead. There's certainly a record somewhere here. I mean, these statements and these identifiers were created from records at some point. But you could, if you want to, you could just lift this graph and stop using the records, you know, if you have enough information in the graph to cover the information that's in the records. And this is very interesting because now the person, William Gibson, is just 2 hops away from the geographic location of, in this case, the Royal Library, where an item is located. It's pretty hard to do with records, actually, or within the library system at least. You could definitely build a system that makes that happen. But here you get it all for free, because you have it in the graph, and you can query the graph. You can use, graph algorithms to do research on this, and it's suddenly very different in a way, because we've minted identifiers for things, and we've created very explicit relationships between these identifiers, and we've got a graph instead. A subtle thing, or it might be subtle, is that if you look, this William Gibson in this case, he's a person. He has a type, fourth person. If you look at an authority record, there's probably the preferred name or something like that. It's not actually the person. It's the string that's on the book, and that's it might be just a subtle difference, but it's really important, because when people come asking me, for example, and saying, "Oh, you have this great authority database. We'd like to use your data. You have lots of people in there that we like to somehow use and relate to," and then I have to say, well, actually, it's not a database of persons. It's a database of strings printed on books, and they get confused, and I don't know why, and they don't feel that as much. They came to us very enthusiastic and went away confused, and that's a bad situation. So what we've done here is trying to move from just recording or dealing with the fact that we get books and the fact that authors have different names in different countries, to actually thinking about that these are actually things. These are persons, or they're resources. And that makes a huge difference when you want to communicate with the world outside the library community, because they can understand persons. They don't understand the other thing. And it's a pretty big difference. And it cannot be done. It can be done easily using just technology, but it's a huge shift in how you think about it. So that's one of the really important parts. And this is what, yeah, perhaps this drawing was not so good. It has consequences when we build interfaces, for example. If you build an interface to record what's on the book, then you tend to just have a simple input field where you write stuff. But what we're actually doing is we're selecting a person. We're pointing to someone who wrote this book. And that's more like your address book than anything else. So if you do that change, you can with good conscience, you can change how you catalog things as well. And this is a sketch we did for the input interface or the cataloging client. This is how we wanted it to work. You start writing and you select the person, and you select how this person relates to whatever it is you're cataloging. And that is something completely different from trying to just write the same string that's in the authority database, which is what you're doing, or we are doing right now, at least. And okay, so we have this graph, and that's fine. Internally we have a relationship between our authority and bibliographic records, and that's interesting. It's very interesting because you can use the technology stack that's used for semantic web. You have a lot of tools. That's very cool, but it doesn't get that interesting until you start linking out to other data sets. And we've created links to VIAF, to Wikipedia, to Library of Congress subject headings, also some internal links to within Swedish, other parts of the Swedish state. The thing here, though, is that if you have this graph, so this is one part of it, but you can look at it this way. We have sort of an internal data set with persons. We have an internal data set with articles. We have an internal data set with subjects. They have very defined relationships with each other through linked data. We know how to change things. For example, if there's an update in the authority database, we know how to take that update and apply it to the bibliographic record if we even need to. We haven't really discussed that, but if we want to sort of maintain these strings, then we're doing it right now, at least. It could be okay to just have the identifier, at least if you're working with internal data. The thing is, though, we have a lot of links to external data, and it soon became clear that it's a bit silly to treat external data differently from internal data. Why should I treat a link to VIAF differently than a link to our own dataset with persons in it? The only thing that differs is that I have more control over our persons or our dataset. Other than that, there's actually no difference. So we started to treat, when building this system, we started to treat our internal dataset as if they were external datasets. We used the same method when we track changes in our authority file that we used to track changes in Library of Congress subject headings. Because Library of Congress subject headings has an add-on feed that you can listen to, so you can track changes within that dataset. We use the exact mechanism inside for our datasets. So it means that something changes in Library of Congress, and that change is propagated directly into our dataset. Something changes in our internal dataset that propagates exactly the same way. The only thing that differs is that perhaps we need to write something back, and we have write access, of course, to our own datasets. But that, of course, would be very interesting if we have parties that, if we trust each other, we could establish a way to write in the other data set as well. And we could keep this big data set, we could keep it updated cooperatively. And sort of a cleaner version of the interface for choosing author would be this, for example. And I can see that August Strindberg exists in LIBRIS via Wikipedia. I get a short summary of who it is, or the short description of the person. So it's easy for me to choose the right person. And Anita Strindberg doesn't exist in our authority database because she hasn't written any books. But if someone were to write a book about her, it would be pretty good to just have the that information from Wikipedia. And of course, you could create an authority file or an authority identifier or an authority record when you make that connection, if you want to, because you may not want to trust Wikipedia 100%. It's up to you. So, to me, that's a huge change. It's a huge change to treat external data sources as if they were internal, and vice versa. And the record is, there will always be records. Oh damn! But there will probably be records for a long time. But the identifier is what actually becomes important. If you hang a record under that identifier or a description or whatever, because the format changes, the identifier needs to stay the same. And you can relate to the identifier without knowing anything about the description. That becomes really, really important because, for example, Wikipedia, they don't have Mark 21 records. It's just an identifier, and there is a description somewhere in there. It will probably change, but it's the identifier is the thing. And oh, did I go too fast? There's the thing about licensing, of course, which is that we've chosen to release the National Bibliography with a CC0 license, which means that you can do anything you want with it. We release everything. We don't hold any. You don't need to do anything. You can just take it and use it however you want, commercially. You don't have to say that it comes from the Library of Sweden, National Library of Sweden. Actually, we may not want you to say that it comes from the National Library of Sweden because we have no idea what you're going to do with it. So it may not be that a great idea. And there's a problem as well, which is that we're aiming for massive reuse with this data. And that means that if someone wants to create, for example, a Ferber work record with 40 or, I don't know, 200 manifestations in it, and all of the national libraries had attribution licenses where you need to say where the data comes from. Then you need somewhere you need to have 200 strings of text that says that, you know, some of this comes from the National Library of Sweden, some of this comes from the National Library of, etc., etc. And in the end, I think that just hinders reuse. People will not use it. If they can take the data and just use it, however, they will use it. I think that even if there's a low threshold, I think reuse will not happen as much, honestly. These are, I mean, within the library community, it's one thing, but it's that interface between us and the people outside. It turns out that they're very, yeah, they just want the data. So basically, the conclusion is this, that if you focus on identifiers instead of records, or identifiers instead of strings, links instead of headings that are sort of hidden deep inside our library systems, and we use we describe things instead of describing just text. The record breaks. It does. There's no record. The record isn't going to work anymore. It becomes uninteresting. But you can build a distributed system, and that is really, really important. And also, the thing that I feel is good for the library community is that we can be more precise and more friendly to the outside world. If we do this, they will understand what we do. They can reuse what we do. They can relate to what we do, and that must be a good thing, because that is basically what libraries are about, to me at least. Essentially, linked data could be exactly the same way as LIBRIS, that you contribute what you should contribute. For example, the National Library of Sweden should probably contribute identifiers for Swedish authors. Library of Congress should probably provide identifiers for American authors. The Deutsche Bibliothek probably for the German, etc., etc. And it's the same thing as LIBRIS, that you do sort of what is unique to you, but you get access to the whole data set because it is linked. And yeah, that's actually the end of my talk.
But we're not finished yet. Let's see. There we are. Thank you, Martin. I'd love to hear you speak about this. I must tell you that last week I went to London to visit a conference that was actually more of a birthday party. It was the 5-year birthday party of another meeting, also in London, which focused on the fit between library standards as RDA, FRBR, ESBD, and such, and the semantic web standards. At this seminar, among others, Barbara Tillett spoke about RDA and the evolving standards on this area. But why I mention this here is because we were reminded at the seminar that it was a double anniversary. It was the 5-year anniversary not only of this meeting and the efforts that started there, but also of the first map of the linked open data map. Actually, it was made just within weeks of that meeting. And this was the humble beginning of what now looks like this. I know. But let's go back to this when it was more, manageable. This, of course, is a kind of coincidence that is not a coincidence. It's people trying to solve the same problems, seeing the same opportunities, and forming different but compatible solutions to the problem. That is just what Martin talks about, getting our data out there, getting them to be more accessible for everyone to use. Since the birth of this diagram and since the London meeting, famously known as the London meeting, we have continued to strive to fit those standards together and have come quite a long way. And today maybe this diagram is becoming obsolete. It's not. It's more like a recipe for an instant headache than than a way to really show what's out there and how can we connect and so on. But as I was not with the National Library when we joined this picture, I must show you. We're up there. There's LIBRIS, and I was not with the library, but I was proud that my small country, our data was out there. And since 2011, when we published the National Bibliography and our authority records as linked open data and everyone can use them, I think that's beautiful. Then I came to LIBRIS and the National Library. And I understood that even though the future is so bright, you have to wear shades. Even if we now have the tools to make our data accessible, we also have to change our mindset. It's not only about having the tools or even about using the tools, but also about understanding them and understanding the power that is within them. Because as metadata coordinator, I have encountered some problems with getting catalogers to think in a different way. I will get back to that. The linked data word suggests new way of thinking about how we work. It suggests new way to think about the record, as Martin has said. He didn't say it today, but he has said privately that the record might be dead. And can we even talk about a record anymore? Or should we more talk about a set of related data existing at a given time? And also the concept of the catalog. What is it we really mean with a catalog? If all data is interrelated and we can relate to other sources, what is it we want to provide? What is it we want to make accessible, and how can we contribute? Is it even in the catalog form that our data is most of interest to our users, or that's a leading question, of course. It's perhaps not in the catalog form that the data is most interesting to our users. I will remind you of the Swedish term smörgåsbord, where you can pick and choose whatever you like and combine it in different ways. And well, not the sad end when you're old, but I hope that giving our data away as linked open data will provide people with the data as a smorgasbord, where you can pick what you want and combine it in new ways. I said I had some troubles at the National Library with getting people to think in a new way. I have only been there for 5 months and I haven't gone mad yet. But I think this is a major mind shift for catalogers, because we have to focus on different things. It's not more about giving an accurate description of something. It's more about stating data, connecting data, understand what data is all about, and also keeping it flexible enough to combine in new ways so it can interrelate and play with other data out there where we won't know what it is. It's like having children, actually. You send them off and you don't know what they're doing. You hope they come back. Actually, I'm not a bad mother, but you know. Anyhow, this with the linked open data and our building a new catalog, that has provoked many questions for us at the National Library of Sweden, and we're in the process of trying to get our minds to change with it. We're looking at, for example, how we work with our national bibliography. We haven't had a print bibliography, of course, for long, but our mission from the government is to produce national bibliography products, whatever that is. And I'm starting to think in this environment that maybe our authority file is a kind of national bibliography product. And that makes us think in another way about how we work with the authority file. Maybe we should, as Martin said, focus on the Swedish so we can contribute with what's unique for us and what we know best and what we can send out there, and then maybe start trusting the Deutsche Nationalbibliothek about the German name forms and so on. That is a way to go, but our catalogers, they are reluctant. What? Shouldn't we, should we be less thorough with the German name forms and so on? I think it's a different focus. You have to just, where do you want to put your effort? Most of us are librarians, or catalogers, a higher life form, and we're all we're all for sharing and giving things away in theory, but we also have to understand what it means. And I am a librarian, but not a cataloger. And my first question is, what's in it for me? my focus with this is not only to give it away because it will bring everyone a brighter future, it's also that I'm concerned with getting the most out of our effort. I think the way the librarian, the catalogist's way of thinking, now technology is finally catching up, and it can do splendid things for us. Cataloging is an expensive business, and this is a way to get more out of it. I'm talking about the National Bibliography strategy and how it is starting to affect our authority works and the guidelines we're having for it. And I also think that our catalogers, if I only talk about the National Library of Sweden, our catalogers and we have to accept that the concept of bibliographic control will also change. We have to accept that there will be different levels of bibliographic control, and maybe focus on what we actually can control and get the most out of it, share it with as many people as possible, and then accept that some of it will only be, maybe not so trustable. It still can be usable, and we haven't seen the best of it yet. We haven't seen what people can do with our data if we let them. So, as I say it, and as I said before, the core of our business is unchanged. We describe resources in order to make them accessible and useful. We add value by making information manageable by means of metadata and stuff. And unless you see the perfect catalog card as the output of our work, I'm sure you agree with me. It's bigger than that, our mission. So linking up is a way to get your data to work harder. And I'm convinced that this is only the beginning. And when we look back at this diagram, and even the more developed map that's from 2011, this is from the first from 2007. I think we will smile forgivingly, and we will, we will see the sea monsters there. We will consider this a very old picture. It's a humble beginning, and we will look. On the big map, you see the green stuff. That's the government part, and that's where the libraries are. And we will go, why wasn't they in the center? Why didn't they use the library data more to get this picture more accurate and makes it work like a better mirror of human knowledge? And we'll go, they were so backwards back then. Oops, a bit fast there. And I think I'm convinced that library data can make a major contribution to this evolution if we only let it. I think we will all be better off for it. We cannot predict the future and what will happen when we share our data with the world, and maybe we shouldn't predict too much. We should just keep it open. We can't predict the future, but we can be a part of it, and that's by formulating our data according to the standards that make them accessible for other people, and by giving the data away to help you get the help from others to improve it. And regretfully, we might lose some sea monsters on the way. I've always had a soft spot for those, but that's a sacrifice I'm ready to make. I would like to end with giving you this speech.
Time for questions, and I'm sure Martin and we will be happy to answer questions. Questions from audience members. Hey, Gina, Artie, and there are a few other hands recognized. What is the system of identifiers that you use? Did you design one locally, so to speak, or what is the, how do you decide?
Right. how do we decide how to mint identifiers? We designed one ourselves based on the DBpedia way of doing it, which was the way people did it then. I guess that's perhaps a sea monster now. But it's no. We mint our own identifiers, and right now it's based on the authority record number. And it's a HTTP URI. That's an interesting discussion. If I don't know if you want to have it, if you had it, it's an HTTP URI, the identifier, and that's very much by design because linked data. To do linked data, you need HTTP URIs, and of course there is a discussion of are HTTP URIs persistent enough. Should we use something else? But it seems that HTTP URIs have won that discussion. At least, in the linked data means HTTP URIs.
Can you tell us if LIBRIS has already been restructured as linked data, and if so, provide an example of something, a specific example of something new that is possible that would not have been possible before?
Right. It is. LIBRIS has been available as linked data since 2008. The bibliographic data, the subject headings, persons, organizations, and also holdings information. We've seen, because what you're talking about is have you seen any reuse? I'd say that the most concrete, but this is internally, but what we've seen what we've done is that we've linked it to Library of Congress subject headings, which our subject headings are based on the Library of Congress subject headings, and we've linked those, and we can do the thing where we track changes in the Library of Congress subject headings. That's sort of very concrete thing that we, something that was hard to do before. And on the other hand, the thing with linked data is it's very hard to track if people use it. It's you can see the links, but the only thing you see is on your web server you can see that someone retrieved this record. I have no idea what they use it for. So it's hard to it's a very relevant question, one that we get a lot. It's very hard to answer. You mean,
what are the names that you decide are in your boundary?
Oh, right, right.
Deciding retrieval and access.
We haven't that part. You mean the sketch of the interface where you choose a person? We haven't decided that yet. So it's I mean that could just be a mess of people that are uninteresting, or not uninteresting people. Or they may be uninteresting as well. Right? Yeah, okay, sorry, my English is failing me. We'll just have to see. I'd say that one way of doing that would of course be to have some sort of relevance. So if for example, you have a hit in VIAF, Wikipedia, our own database, DBpedia, and all of these are linked, then you should probably present that to the user. An A to Z list might just be, might not work. But we'll have to see.
So browse is less of a part of your will than keyword searching?
Yes.
Like most ILSs.
Sorry?
Like most of the modern ILSs, there is no browse.
Right.
Mm.
And it's, yeah.
That's the other hands too.
In your PowerPoint, you refer to a CC0 sign. What does that mean?
The CC0 license? The CC0 license is a Creative Commons. It's Creative Commons 0 is the full name of the license, and it just means that you give every right away. You retain no right whatsoever. So you essentially put the data in the public domain. Of course, you can only do this with data that you have rights to, or if you cleared it. But it's it means that people can use it. They don't have to acknowledge that it came from you or anything.
Our goal is to publish all of LIBRIS in that way.
Right.
Yeah, we're aiming for that, but you know, we have to look from where we got the records originally, and
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's I hope you've seen that Harvard has last week released, I think, around 12 million records with the CC0 license.
In your authority records, I assume you still do have authority records.
Yes, we do.
When you need to link between one entity and another entity, are you putting strings in those references or just identifying?
Both. Usually both. Or rather, it depends, because we have, for example, if it's that a book is created by someone, then we both have the string and the identifier. Yeah. Yes.
In your slide where you mentioned the things versus strings debate and how you were moving, taking persons as an example away from linking to names, instead linking to persons. I was just wondering, how do you reconcile that with, you're using a version of AACR2, how do you reconcile that with the rules for pseudonyms?
I'd say that, okay,
No,
just
you
before.
You understand why I'm going mad?
The thing is, if you break up the records, you can have an identifier for the pseudonym as well. And you just connect, you have one identifier for the physical person, and you have an identifier for the pseudonym, and then you link those two together. That exactly. And that also means that if you have a pseudonym that is actually two persons, it's not a problem. You just link to the same name.
We're now using AACR2, a Swedish translation, and most probably moving to RDA, but we've found it's much easier to put together than split up afterwards, so we keep things that split up as possible. Yes, back there.
Yes, we're building a completely new one, because we need to. Yeah, we still need the cataloging client, of course. We need a very good cataloging client, so we're building a completely new one. The project lead for that project sits over there, if you want to talk to her, and because we also need to, for example, catalog other metadata formats, and we're hoping that we can reuse components, because if you start to select persons instead of trying to encode a string in a certain format, then it's very easy just to convert that selection into any format.
This isn't going to be a very exact question because I don't really understand the issues. But you started talking a little bit about licensing and data, licensing for reuse. And that's a discussion that's been going on here for a little while now, particularly in connection with OCLC, which recently proposed a policy for licensing of data. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how library data can be licensed, given that we have varied sources with varying claims on the data, how we can publish library data in a way that's reusable in an environment where different people make claims on what they own.
Yeah, that's a very difficult difficult terrain. But sort of our standpoint is that if CC0 is a good license, because it gets very easy. For example, you don't need to have this discussion. There's if you have anything else than CC0, then it becomes a discussion. How do you use it? Do you need to attribute? Do you need to add attribution if you just add? If you use a statement from one record? There's a whole discussion on that. So what we're doing is we're releasing our data as CC0. We're going after people, organizations that have organizations from which we have records. We are simply asking them if we can release their records as CC0 as well. And in the end, in the end, if I'm going to say, if everyone releases their data as CC0, then it just becomes very, very easy. That will probably take some time, but our stand is CC0 is a very good license for data. Attribution licenses, I mean, any license that is where you can reuse, where you can use it, and you can use it commercially, that's a good license. It's not bad. But if you're really aiming for reuse, then CC0 is much better.
But in the meantime, we will have to, for the next couple of years, we will have to be able to handle data with all kinds of licensing and all levels of licensing. We're not against that as an idea. It's just we want to do our part in making our data open.
Sorry, just to clarify the same topic, that means that what you put on your CC0 is only the metadata you produce?
Yes.
And in order to import, say, from a CLC, you can.
Right.
Right.
Well, yeah. Until last week, I would have said definitely. But then Harvard released 12 million records with CC0. So who knows?
There's a whole world of data out there, and I mean we're starting to clean up our database and checking the licenses and how we can use them and so on. And I think much of it that we haven't produced ourselves we will still be able to give it out under a license CC0. So it's a trend. It's starting to become a trend now with Harvard.
What role do you see for efforts like ISNI, the International Standard Name Identifier, in the future?
We think that's very, very interesting, and we are following. We're taking part in the Swedish Onyx group to follow these standards, and I think eventually the National Library of Sweden will be the national provider of ISNIs, because we think they will be very, very useful. Both them and ISTCs I think they will fit in neatly to our new way of thinking about cataloging.
Couple questions. One, I'm interested in the disappearance of a record, and I'm wondering if, in fact, your library has achieved that already, or if you are still, if that's a goal.
It's a goal. Okay. Because what we need is the linked data part needs to cover the whole description that's in the Mark 21 records for that to happen. Otherwise, you lose data. But the nice thing is that you can provide this in parallel. So right now we have records for everything. I mean, we still have a classic ILS in sort of the core of this is still a traditional ILS right now. We're aiming to, or we will replace it, but we'll replace it with something that can use both records or not. And once the description level of this graph or semantic web covers the whole of the records, there's no point in keeping the record. But until that happens, there will still be a record. But the important part is that the identifier, you still get the identifier, and the record is it's important, of course, but the identifier and linking layer is almost as important, and then you will move more and more of the description from the record into the graph, and then at some point the record will be useless.
But as we see it, we will be able to, deliver records and handle records.
Oh, definitely.
I think in all my lifetime, because there are just too many MARC records out there. Now, MARC is very good for certain things. So.
I think changing the mindset about this is almost more important than not dealing with records, because we need to deal with records.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you said, for a long time, if for nothing else but then to interact with other systems that still use records. But
we can create them on the fly.
Exactly. It's how, it's a mind thing.
Well, so the whole concept of a record has always been as a central gathering point of all the different building blocks that you're talking about.
Yep.
And that you're talking about needing as building blocks rather than aggregating into a record.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious about one of the graphs that you showed. You showed the beginning of the linked data system, and you said this is ancient history at this point, and then you showed a sort of daisy image of what it had become.
Right.
And so what I'm curious about is what is at the center of that particular universe?
DBpedia is at the center of this universe, because DBpedia is the semantic web version of Wikipedia, and everyone links to DBpedia. I think this graph is you get to be in the center if you're the most linked to source or dataset. Then you get to be in the center of this map, and that is DBpedia right now.
And that's what I meant with, maybe libraries could move further into the middle of this.
Right.
Because we should have the abilities to contribute to that.
Yeah, and you can see Library of Congress subject headings. Quite a
You're
lot.
also a mathematician.
Quite a lot of people link to that. It's over here. We used to be much further in the middle, when both Library of Congress subject headings and LIBRIS was new.
And VF is on.
VF?
VF
Also,
is
yes.
definitely.
It's getting more useless because you can't find things. It's there.
Yeah.
It's there. Did you?
And Library of Congress subject headings was actually one of the first, or perhaps the first, example of library data exposed as semantic web. Must have been 2007 or something like that.
So it's nice to be here and be called innovators, but you were actually first.
Yeah, you should talk to Ed Summers.
I have a question about quality control, and if you are willing to accept user input, then how do you make sure that there are certain standards that are met and accuracy is achieved in order to make these links work? What I'm seeing is sort of supposed to work like Wikipedia does, many people contribute, but in order for it to be useful and to have certain integrity, you have to have some control measures.
Right. It's not sort of a Wikipedia model is not a consequence of this. You could definitely do that. I think that you would probably establish some sort of trust between organizations, rather, that the National Library or the Library of Congress trusts the National Library of Sweden to mint identifier for Swedish authors and also provide a good description. It's probably, but on the other hand, DBpedia is exactly that, or Wikipedia is exactly that. That it's a cooperative thing where anyone can contribute. It's not inherent in the model, but yeah.
I'm not quite sure how that is different from the various cooperative efforts that exist right now,
Right. We would definitely need to, I mean, it wouldn't happen automatically, but we might decide to trust Wikipedia, for example. And of course you could build something that it doesn't happen automatically, but if something gets created and someone has to set it, you know, put a check somewhere and say that this correction is okay or something, you could build that. But it's basically, do you trust Wikipedia or not? And if you decide that you do,
that's a mind leap. I mean, you can't really know, and that's why we talked about there must be perhaps levels of sureness in catalog, levels of bibliographic control. But this, as Martin said, it's a web of trust. It's a picture of people trusting each other.
Okay. Any other pressing questions? If not, then let us thank Miriam and Martin.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.